Section 7. The stars above Babylon blink like lazy embers, and you pause under a crooked fig tree to rub the sleep from your eyes. Clay dust still clings to your sandals, and the faint echo of styluses tapping against tablets lingers like a lullaby. But tonight's history lesson isn't quite done. Not yet, because as you turn down another narrow lane, dodging a pair of boys chasing a dog, you find yourself on the quieter edge of town. Here, near the warehouses and granaries, you stumble upon what may be the single most boring-sounding yet surprisingly essential part of Babylonian society: the Bureau of Weights and Measures. Yes, Babylon had one, and you're about to meet the man in charge of making sure every single shekel, grain measure, and bolt of dyed linen is weighed, counted, and recorded with soul-numbing precision. His name, probably something noble-sounding like Ninsabar or Kuduru, is lost to time, but you can call him the inspector. Everyone else does. You step into his workspace, a modest chamber lined with neatly stacked baskets and stone counterweights carved with symbols. There's a massive hanging scale at the center, its bronze pans polished and oddly elegant. The inspector, wiry and barefoot, greets you without looking up. He's currently weighing a jar of sesame oil against an official clay weight shaped like a duck. Not metaphorically, a literal duck. Babylon, it turns out, loved standardization almost as much as storytelling. Receipts alone weren't enough to be valid. The items listed had to conform to precise units measured at the temple's bureau. If you bought 6 minas of copper, the seller had to weigh them in front of a certified clerk. Only then could the scribe write your receipt with confidence, seal it, and bake it. This, of course, led to arguments. Just yesterday, the inspector tells you, a trader tried to sneak in an overweight clay duck disguised as a temple-certified mina. I told him, this bird's been eating too well. The inspector says with a shrug. He offered me a bribe. I offered him a citation. The man's sense of humor is bone dry, like the clay he handles. You watch as he checks a merchant's bundle of dyed cloth. Each bolt is inspected, weighed, and matched against a previously issued receipt tablet. The tablet itself lists not just quantity, but color, weave density, and the origin of the wool. An old woman's flock from north of Sapar, apparently. And here comes a scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Babylon's obsession with accuracy was religious in nature, ensuring fair offerings to the gods, or purely bureaucratic. Either way, this little room, with its weights and clay ducks, served as the guardian of trust in the kingdom. If someone tampered with their measures, chaos, merchants would revolt, temples would lose revenue, scribes would weep into their barley soup. You walk the perimeter of the room. There's a shelf of worn weights shaped like lions, frogs, and one angry-looking turtle. Each bears a faint temple mark, proof of divine calibration. Even gods, it seems, had opinions on inventory. On a nearby wall is a wax tablet, rare and valuable. The inspector uses it to calculate weight conversions before they're committed to clay. You watch as he uses a bronze stylus to scratch out an equation involving shekels, talents, and fractions so precise they'd make a modern accountant break into a sweat. Outside, a donkey brays, probably tired of waiting while its load of onions is verified. You peek outside to see a clerk rolling a small cart across the stones. Weighed tablets balanced atop it like pastries. And now, a fringe tidbit. Babylonian contracts often included weight contingencies, small notations that allowed for spoilage or shrinkage over time. One surviving tablet reads, if the sesame oil weighs less by the third moon, tenant must deliver fig cakes equal to the missing draft. That's right, fig cakes as legal restitution. Delicious justice. Back inside, the inspector is now demonstrating how fraud is detected. He picks up a tablet from last week, a receipt for 3 jars of date wine. He weighs the jar, compares it to the figure on the tablet, then snorts. Too light. Someone's been sipping. He marks the tablet with a tiny crosshatch, a Babylonian red flag. You ask what happens next. We notify the merchant. If he denies it, he can appeal to the tribunal. He says with a shrug, or offer a goat. They usually offer a goat. You both laugh, because here's the charm. In Babylon, everything tied back to clay. Justice, fraud, commerce, and cooking oil. All had to be written down, weighed out, sealed with a cylinder, and filed somewhere sacred. And all of it came through rooms like this, filled with funny-looking weights, scribes with smudged elbows, and people who understood that a society without standards would crumble like wet mud. You step back into the cooling air, heart oddly full. You were expecting dusty receipts and dry lists. Instead, you found stories in every weight, humor in every duck-shaped measure, and a weird craving for fig cakes. From the ziggurat spire, a light flickers just once. A signal? A shift change? Or maybe a sleepy priest stretching too close to a lamp. You start walking toward it anyway, past carts of onions, past sleeping dogs, past another child learning to write their name in clay. And you realize that in this city of seals and scales, everyone's leaving a mark. And maybe, just maybe, you will too. Section 8. The temple looms larger as you approach, each tier of its towering ziggurat wrapped in the smoky blue haze of dusk. You crane your neck and squint upward. It's no easy feat, standing at the base of a structure built like a staircase to heaven. But you're not climbing it tonight. Not yet, anyway. Instead, you slip into a side hall just beyond the base, where flickering oil lamps cast puddles of golden light onto the stone floors. The scent of incense and beeswax hangs heavy in the air. You're here to witness what is arguably the most sacred part of the Babylonian receipt system, the ritual sealing of tablets inside temple archives. And no, it's not glamorous. You're met by a pair of young acolytes carrying a sealed basket filled with clay receipts. They're sweaty, barefoot, and bickering over which one dropped a tablet earlier. Their supervisor, a wiry priest with an expression like he's constantly biting into a lemon, waves you inside. You follow them through a narrow corridor lined with niches. Inside each one sits a small clay envelope, hardened by fire and marked with a unique impression. These are the sealed archives, and this process, it's what turns a regular transaction into a matter of cosmic importance. Here's how it works. When a major trade is completed, say, 200 jars of honey sent from Kish, the transaction is written on 2 clay tablets. One is given to the buyer, the other to the temple. But the temple's copy is wrapped in a clay envelope, then stamped with a cylinder seal belonging to a priest or scribe. And this isn't just bureaucracy, it's theater. The seal itself is often beautifully carved, a continuous image of lions hunting or gods in discussion. The priest rolls it across the soft clay like a sleepy scroll, and voila! The transaction is now official. Divine, even. You watch one being sealed now. A scribe gently presses his cylinder seal into the wet envelope. It features a little scene of Enki, god of water, surrounded by fish and a bird wearing a crown. Someone chuckles. Enki again. That guy loves paperwork. They bake the sealed envelope in a small portable kiln, and the whole room grows a few degrees hotter. You wipe sweat from your brow and peer over the priest's shoulder. There it is, a newly immortalized debt. 200 liters of barley pledged for temple use, to be repaid by midsummer. This isn't just record-keeping. It's trust manifested in clay. A curious tidbit. Some tablets were even double-sealed. After one seal was applied, a second, higher-ranking priest might roll theirs over it again, like getting both a notary stamp and a royal signature. Historians still argue whether this double sealing was purely ceremonial or a way to resolve power struggles between temple officials. Either way, it added a second layer of cosmic insurance. You trail your fingers along the older shelves, where rows of cracked and faded tablets gather dust. These are years, sometimes decades, old. Some are even marked as resolved with a sharp strike through the middle. Others remain sealed and untouched, their contents still a mystery, like unopened letters from a world long gone. You pause in front of one particularly ancient-looking archive. The clay has darkened, almost black with age. The priest sees your interest and whispers, "That one's from King Sumularel's reign. Still hasn't been broken. We think it's a tax dispute." You imagine a disgruntled Babylonian farmer waiting centuries for a verdict. Just then, an older scribe walks in, holding a sealed envelope with both hands as if it's a sacred relic. "Late delivery," he mutters. "Damaged in the flood. The envelope is badly chipped. A chunk is missing, which probably once bore the seal." We'll need to verify it, the priest says, already preparing a thin metal rod to crack it open. This, too, is part of the process, the rare unsealing of a tablet. Cracking open a sealed tablet was like peeling the wax off an unopened letter. The goal? To ensure the contents matched what was originally written. If they didn't, well, someone had explaining to do, and possibly a goat to offer. You lean in as they split the envelope. The inner tablet emerges, faintly charred but still legible. The script inside matches. Everyone nods. Relief. Another crisis avoided. But here's where Babylon gets cheeky. Occasionally, tablets were triple written, one for the buyer, one for the seller, and one sealed in the temple, like a Mesopotamian version of CCing your lawyer, your grandma, and your god. You ask how they organize all of these. By category, says the acolyte who dropped the tablet earlier, now puffed up with pride. Livestock, grains, textiles, debt pledges, marriage settlements, adoption agreements. Oh, and ghost debts. Ghost debts? He grins. Debts that were recorded but never repaid. The seals broke. The people died. The gods forgot. He points to a dark corner of the archive. That's where we keep those. Chilling and oddly comforting. You take one last look at the glowing shelf of sealed tablets. Dozens of years, thousands of transactions, lives and trades compressed into hand-sized slabs. And they've endured for millennia, not because anyone planned it that way, but because clay is just that stubborn. Outside, the night air hits you like a lullaby. Somewhere in the temple garden, a musician strums a soft tune on a lyre. You smile. Even gods need background music. As you walk away from the archive, you realize something simple but profound. The Babylonians didn't just write history. They sealed it, locked it in place, and trusted future eyes, like yours, to one day understand. You're getting closer now. Closer to the beating heart of Babylon's economy, its temples, its myths. But for now, you walk a little slower, your footsteps echoing like styluses in the night. Section 9. You rub your eyes as you follow a group of scribes into yet another courtyard. Your sandals are coated with a light layer of clay dust now, and your arms ache slightly from trying to carry one of the heavier record tablets earlier. Spoiler, not worth it. This time, though, you're not watching scribes work. You're watching merchants haggle, and the receipts they generate as a result. Welcome to the Bazaar of Babylon, a thunderous, chaotic haven of trade, smells, laughter, and the occasional sheep on the run. While the temples handled the sacred and the large-scale economic affairs, the open markets were where the average Babylonian got things done. And guess what? They needed receipts, too. Picture it. A rug merchant with a beard the size of a sleeping cat shouts something about imported indigo dye. A fish seller 2 stalls over insists his catch was still swimming this morning, though one of the fish looks like it's already halfway to jerky. You drift between them, fascinated by the cacophony of voices and transactions. But here's what surprises you. The same careful system you saw in the temple is alive here, too. Portable clay tablets. Tiny styluses tucked into belts. Miniature cylinder seals worn around the neck. And instead of a priest or a royal scribe, there's usually a freelance notary. Someone who can quickly record a sale, etch in a payment term, and seal the whole thing on the spot. You watch one such notary in action. 2 young men are arguing over a cart full of onions. The buyer accuses the seller of watering them to increase the weight. The seller scoffs and points to his scale. The notary sighs like he's done this 10 times today, he probably has, and offers a solution. Write a debt pledge, deliver half the onions now, the rest if the buyer survives the first batch. The transaction is quickly jotted down in cuneiform. The buyer spits on the ground, either tradition or poor aim, and presses his seal into the clay. It's a simple spiral, elegant and fast. The seller adds his own, a lion devouring a goat. And just like that, the great Babylonian onion deal of the day is preserved. This is how commerce moved. Fast, personal, but somehow documented in clay. Now, here's where it gets quirky. Some receipts weren't meant to last. Instead of baking the clay tablet to harden it, people would let them dry just enough for temporary use. Once the debt was paid or the trade completed, the tablet could be soaked in water and reused like an etch-a-sketch of antiquity. Sustainable, right? except when it rained unexpectedly, which turned some entire stall's records into mud pies. You stroll past a woman selling goatskin bags. She's old, sharp-eyed, and carries a small wooden box of receipts under her stall. You peek in, dozens of clay slivers carefully stacked. Marriages, debts, wine trades, she says, her Acadian clipped and dry. Some folks still owe me for shoes from last festival. One tablet is chipped. That one? She shrugs. He tried to cheat me on silver weight. His seal broke before the gods. You get the sense that's a polite way of saying she hit him with a sandal. Historians still argue whether women were equally involved in economic documentation. Some tablets show female names, even female seal impressions. But whether they were fully recognized or merely tolerated seems to depend on the region, the rain, and the mood of the local temple. Still, the evidence suggests that Babylonian women could lend, trade, and notarize, especially if they had property or temple rolls. You move on to the textile section. This is where receipts really shine. Cloth trades were complex. You'd often have to measure threads per inch, dye source, weave technique, delivery deadlines. Each of these elements was part of the receipt. You listen as a cloth merchant explains a deal. For rolls of wool, indigo dyed, to be delivered by the new moon. If not, half-price refund. The notary jots it all down. You notice the addition of a symbol, a crescent moon next to a small jar. This shorthand, used by scribes, made tablets more efficient. Like emojis, but legal. One scribe you meet carries a bundle of these emoji tablets and offers to show you his favorite. He laughs as he presents it, a rental agreement for a donkey. At the bottom, two little etched donkeys face each other, mid-bray. It was a loud one, he winks. As you loop back toward the edge of the bazaar, you pass a stall that sells used tablets. Cracked, faded, or smudged beyond recognition. Some are sold as keepsakes, others as household weights. A child tries to lick one. His mother screams, a scribe sighs, and yet, every corner of this place hums with the ghost of paperwork. Even as goods move and silver clinks, the real trade is in memory, ensuring that someone somewhere wrote it down. You lean against a sun-warmed wall and close your eyes for a moment. The crowd becomes a muffled thrum, the kind that might carry you off to sleep if you weren't careful. The air smells of dates and dust. You think of the merchant who sealed a jar of wine today, trusting that little tablet to hold both his future and his honor. Receipts, after all, are more than transactions. They are time capsules, brief moments of trust etched into the bones of the earth. And you're standing in a city that dared to trust in clay. Tomorrow, you'll explore how these records shaped law. But tonight, just let the soft hum of the market and the rhythmic clink of clay soothe you into stillness. Section 10. You stretch your legs and shuffle through the soft grit of Babylon's thoroughfare, following the shadowy silhouette of a tall, broad wall. No carvings here, just thick stone blocks scorched warm by the afternoon sun. You're approaching something quieter now. The noise of the bazaar fades, replaced by the slow footfalls of a guard and the distant murmuring of prayers. You're standing before the courthouse. This isn't a place where shouting merchants or singing pomegranate sellers gather. This is where Babylonian receipts meet their ultimate test. The courtroom. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't fare too well in ancient Babylonian court. The rules were, shall we say, a little different. If you accused someone of stealing your donkey and couldn't prove it, you might get thrown into the river. And if you were lying, that river might be the last thing you ever feel. Justice came with splash damage. You step into the dim interior, where reed mats cover the floor and a few torches flicker quietly. A trio of elders, respected, silver-haired, and mildly annoyed by the heat, sit cross-legged, reviewing clay tablets as though they were gossip scrolls. A dispute is in session. A man, red-faced and nervous, holds out a small, baked receipt. It's barely bigger than a matchbox. I paid the grain tax, he insists. I sealed it, right here. The elder in the center squints, turns the tablet, and examines the seal. This is from your neighbor's jar, he says dryly. Oops, case closed. Here's the thing. Legal proceedings relied heavily on written records, but they weren't always fair. Sometimes, the judge's memory overruled a receipt. Other times, a smudged seal led to months of house arrest. The law code of Hammurabi, that famous basalt monolith standing somewhere behind you, is engraved with rules like, if a man gives silver to another man and receives no receipt, he cannot claim it again. No receipt, no justice. Think about that next time you buy coffee without a text confirmation. The elders speak softly in Akkadian. One points to a more complex receipt, a land deed with boundary marks and tax stipulations. It includes witness seals. Yes, multiple witnesses were sometimes required to make a receipt legally valid. That made it harder to forge, though plenty still tried. You wander to the back of the chamber, where a younger scribe copies judgments onto larger tablets. He works with calm, meticulous focus, pressing stylus to clay with steady fingers. His task? Creating a public record, a tablet of the ruling that would be displayed for others to see. Basically, ancient Babylonian Yelp reviews, but less petty. There's a funny tablet here, half broken, that reads, "The debtor claimed the goat was dead before he received it." You imagine the judge raising an eyebrow and sighing deeply. Historians still argue whether this case actually ended in a goat duel or just a heavy fine. Records fade after all. And here comes the twist. Sometimes receipts weren't just evidence, they were weapons. Picture a vengeful neighbor digging up a 10-year-old tablet to prove that your uncle once borrowed a sack of barley and never paid it back. Boom. Family feud rekindled. In one case found near Sapar, a woman presented a receipt from her deceased husband, proving she was owed rent. The landlord laughed, until the seal matched perfectly and the court ordered compensation. You stretch your legs and shuffle through the soft grit of Babylon's thoroughfare, following the shadowy silhouette of a tall, broad wall. No carvings here, just thick stone blocks scorched warm by the afternoon sun. You're approaching something quieter now. The noise of the bazaar fades, replaced by the slow footfalls of a guard and the distant murmuring of prayers. You're standing before the courthouse. This isn't a place where shouting merchants or singing pomegranate sellers gather. This is where Babylonian receipts meet their ultimate test. The courtroom. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't fare too well in ancient Babylonian court. The rules were, shall we say, a little different. If you accused someone of stealing your donkey and couldn't prove it, you might get thrown into the river. And if you were lying, that river might be the last thing you ever feel. Justice came with splash damage. You step into the dim interior, where reed mats cover the floor and a few torches flicker quietly. A trio of elders, respected, silver-haired, and mildly annoyed by the heat, sit cross-legged, reviewing clay tablets as though they were gossip scrolls. A dispute is in session. A man, red-faced and nervous, holds out a small, baked receipt. It's barely bigger than a matchbox. "I paid the grain tax," he insists. "I sealed it, right here." The elder in the center squints, turns the tablet, and examines the seal. "This is from your neighbor's jar," he says dryly. "Oops, case closed." Here's the thing. Legal proceedings relied heavily on written records, but they weren't always fair. Sometimes, the judge's memory overruled a receipt. Other times, a smudged seal led to months of house arrest. The law code of Hammurabi, that famous basalt monolith standing somewhere behind you, is engraved with rules like, if a man gives silver to another man and receives no receipt, he cannot claim it again. No receipt, no justice. Think about that next time you buy coffee without a text confirmation. The elders speak softly in Akkadian. One points to a more complex receipt, a land deed with boundary marks and tax stipulations. It includes witness seals. Yes, multiple witnesses were sometimes required to make a receipt legally valid. That made it harder to forge, though plenty still tried. You wander to the back of the chamber, where a younger scribe copies judgments onto larger tablets. He works with calm, meticulous focus, pressing stylus to clay with steady fingers. His task? Creating a public record, a tablet of the ruling that would be displayed for others to see. Basically, ancient Babylonian Yelp reviews, but less petty. There's a funny tablet here, half broken, that reads, "The debtor claimed the goat was dead before he received it." You imagine the judge raising an eyebrow and sighing deeply. Historians still argue whether this case actually ended in a goat duel or just a heavy fine. Records fade after all. And here comes the twist. Sometimes receipts weren't just evidence, they were weapons. Picture a vengeful neighbor digging up a 10-year-old tablet to prove that your uncle once borrowed a sack of barley and never paid it back. Boom. Family feud rekindled. In one case found near Sapar, a woman presented a receipt from her deceased husband, proving she was owed rent. The landlord laughed, until the seal matched perfectly and the court ordered compensation. Who needs a ghost when you have a receipt with receipts? You sit near a cracked stone pillar, watching another dispute unfold. This one's about irrigation. One farmer claims his neighbor redirected canal water into his own field. A receipt is presented showing water-sharing rights. The judge, barely holding back a yawn, waves it off. "This seal is upside down," he mutters. The plaintiff groans. The defendant smirks. The lesson? Clay tablets were helpful, but only when done right. That meant the correct seal, proper dates, and names written clearly. Some people even paid professional scribes extra to embellish their receipts, hoping a fancier tablet would be taken more seriously. Branding, Babylon style. You glance toward a small alcove in the wall. It's filled with older tablets, records too important to discard, court precedents, we'd call them today. There's a palpable reverence here, like stepping into a legal fossil bed. Each tablet tells a story of grain owed, marriages disputed, land transferred, and yes, the occasional false beard accusation. Babylon was nothing if not thorough. Now an odd smell reaches your nose. Not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. Baked clay and old reed parchment. It's oddly comforting, like the scent of a well-worn library. You watch as a new case is called forward. A woman steps up, firm-voiced and clutching a tablet that looks worn smooth from being handled so much. Her case? That her dowry was never returned after a failed marriage. She presents the receipt. Silver weights listed, her father's seal beside it. The court listens. Slowly, they nod. Historians still debate how much power Babylonian women had in court. Some claim women were frequent litigants, especially in economic matters. Others suggest their rights were mostly confined to temple-affiliated women. But in this moment, under the amber torchlight, this woman's voice holds weight. So does her clay tablet. And that's the thread tying it all together, isn't it? In Babylon, justice didn't just rely on truth, it relied on recorded truth. In clay, with a name, a seal, and a date. You mess that up, and suddenly your barley field belongs to your cousin. As the judges rise to end the session, you step back into the evening air. The city's glow returns, torches flickering on rooftops, voices rising in late-night banter. Somewhere, another receipt is being stamped into clay. Maybe it's for figs. Maybe it's for bail. You exhale slowly, letting the weight of thousands of decisions and disputes melt into the warm night air. Babylon's legal machine was complex, but strangely familiar. Contracts, claims, complaints, all immortalized in rectangles of clay. And the best part? No paper cuts. Section 10. You stretch your legs and shuffle through the soft grit of Babylon's thoroughfare, following the shadowy silhouette of a tall, broad wall. No carvings here, just thick stone blocks scorched warm by the afternoon sun. You're approaching something quieter now. The noise of the bazaar fades, replaced by the slow footfalls of a guard and the distant murmuring of prayers. You're standing before the courthouse. This isn't a place where shouting merchants or singing pomegranate sellers gather. This is where Babylonian receipts meet their ultimate test. The courtroom. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't fare too well in ancient Babylonian court. The rules were, shall we say, a little different. If you accused someone of stealing your donkey and couldn't prove it, you might get thrown into the river. And if you were lying, that river might be the last thing you ever feel. Justice came with splash damage. You step into the dim interior, where reed mats cover the floor and a few torches flicker quietly. A trio of elders, respected, silver-haired, and mildly annoyed by the heat, sit cross-legged, reviewing clay tablets as though they were gossip scrolls. A dispute is in session. A man, red-faced and nervous, holds out a small, baked receipt. It's barely bigger than a matchbox. "I paid the grain tax," he insists. "I sealed it, right here." The elder in the center squints, turns the tablet, and examines the seal. "This is from your neighbor's jar," he says dryly. "Oops, case closed." Here's the thing. Legal proceedings relied heavily on written records, but they weren't always fair. Sometimes the judge's memory overruled a receipt. Other times, a smudged seal led to months of house arrest. The law code of Hammurabi, that famous basalt monolith standing somewhere behind you, is engraved with rules like, if a man gives silver to another man and receives no receipt, he cannot claim it again. No receipt, no justice. Think about that next time you buy coffee without a text confirmation. The elders speak softly in Akkadian. One points to a more complex receipt, a land deed with boundary marks and tax stipulations. It includes witness seals. Yes, multiple witnesses were sometimes required to make a receipt legally valid. That made it harder to forge, though plenty still tried. You wander to the back of the chamber, where a younger scribe copies judgments onto larger tablets. He works with calm, meticulous focus, pressing stylus to clay with steady fingers. His task? Creating a public record, a tablet of the ruling that would be displayed for others to see. Basically, ancient Babylonian Yelp reviews, but less petty. There's a funny tablet here, half broken, that reads, "The debtor claimed the goat was dead before he received it." You imagine the judge raising an eyebrow and sighing deeply. You wander deeper into the twilight city, sandals brushing dust from the packed earth road. It's quieter now, markets are closing, and oil lamps flicker from small stone windows. Babylon at night is gentle, humming, and still somehow wide awake. You pass by a modest workshop with a carved wooden sign, a stylized cuneiform glyph. You found what you're looking for, the seal carver's studio. This is where the true magic behind Babylonian receipts was born. Inside, the space is smaller than you expected, but bursting with detail. Rows of tiny stones rest in wooden trays, each no bigger than your thumb. Lapis lazuli, jasper, chalcedony, stones that catch and reflect the light in shades of sea blue and blood red. At the back, seated cross-legged, a man with wild white hair and steady hands scrapes a groove into a cylinder. His tools are finer than needles, some made of bronze, others of fishbone. You lean in quietly and watch him at work. He's engraving a lion, but not just any lion. This one's surrounded by stars, with a crescent moon curled beneath its feet. Beside it, a line of tiny symbols, a name, maybe Shamash favors Nabu, or something equally poetic. These were personal seals, signatures that went beyond ink or paper. Babylonian seals were status symbols, legal identifiers, even little art pieces. Press them into wet clay, and voila, proof of presence, power, or purchase. Like a cross between a debit card and a mini-mural. Each seal was unique, not just in design but in material and story. A merchant might have camels and palm trees. A priestess might feature winged gods and sacred text. And if you were really fancy, you added a little mythology. Why not have Gilgamesh wrestling a bull as your signature? Bold move. You imagine commissioning your own. What would it be? A sleeping cat beside a stack of books? A cup of coffee and a cloud? Whatever it is, you'd better hope the carving comes out clean. One slip of the tool, and suddenly your noble eagle looks like a startled duck. The sealmaker pauses to wipe his hands. His apprentice, a sharp-eyed teenager, shows you a finished piece. It's polished and cool to the touch, with its imagery reversed for stamping. You marvel at the craftsmanship. Historians still debate whether carvers worked from memory, sketches, or both. But one thing is clear, they had steady hands and possibly the patience of a mountain. There were different types of seals, too. The cylinder seal, most iconic, could be rolled across clay to create a full scene. Then there were stamp seals, simpler but just as valid. Wealthier Babylonians might own multiple seals, one for personal use, one for business, and maybe one just to impress dinner guests. The carving process was slow, sometimes taking days. Mistakes weren't easy to fix. Start over? Or try to pass off a lopsided lion as avant-garde? Good luck with that. Forgery? Oh yes, it happened, but rarely successfully, because here's the trick. Seals were trusted, but only when combined with context. A seal on the wrong kind of tablet, without the right names or witnesses. Suspicious. A seal appearing twice in 2 cities, days apart? Very suspicious. Babylonian scribes weren't just writers, they were forensic specialists with very keen eyes. You shift closer to the shelf where older seals are kept. Some are worn smooth from use. Others are cracked, retired, maybe after their owner passed on. In some cases, families kept ancestral seals for generations. Kind of like inheriting your grandmother's signature. If her signature also featured a sun god chasing an ostrich. One display catches your eye. An unusually large seal featuring 3 figures and what appears to be a date palm. It's labeled, crudely, Estate of Dereker. The story behind it is murky, but one theory says the estate was divided among 5 siblings, each of whom had a replica seal made for joint property claims. Imagine the family arguments. Even more fascinating, some seals were used not for commerce, but for ritual purposes. Priests stamped ceremonial texts with divine iconography, often invoking Marduk, Ishtar, or Enki. Seals weren't just legal, they were cosmic stamps of approval. You reach out to touch one, then pause. Best not to offend ancient spirits with greasy fingers. Outside, the air is cooler. You step back onto the street and watch as a merchant carefully seals a parcel of grain. One roll of his cylinder seal across the wet clay plug, and boom. It's marked personal, undeniable. If someone tries to mess with that parcel later, the broken seal will rat them out. And here's something you hadn't thought of. Seals were also a kind of time capsule. Archaeologists today find them buried in abandoned storerooms, temples, even graves. Sometimes they're all that remains of a person's existence. A tiny image, a name, and a date. Some scholars still argue about their exact social role. Were seals mostly business tools? Were they expressions of identity? Were they low-key Babylonian NFTs? Hard to say, but what's clear is this. In ancient Babylon, sealing something meant you meant it. No takebacks, no excuses. Once that clay was stamped and dried, your promise was baked into history. As you stroll away from the studio, you spot a small boy holding his father's hand, proudly holding up a toy clay tablet with a doodled seal. His father laughs and ruffles his hair. You smile. Some things, it seems, never change.